Welcome back to the Collective Journey. It's Monday. Courtney and
Abe
are back with you guys. We're here and we're chugging along. How are you guys today? Hope you're doing good. So this week was a very interesting week. I feel like, am I wrong if I say, Abe, this week we kind of made Air Force history with how we took on, so we were given the task to facilitate a conversation about extremism because obviously there's been over the last year, it's been like just building. And with the recent events that took place over the last couple months, I think it was just like the cherry on top of the sundae, like that the military saw like, hey, we need to address this and we need to make sure that we do it in the most correct way that we can, I would say. So Abe and I were actually both tasked with facilitating a conversation with our work centers on extremism, and we basically made history when you think about it because we've never done that before in the military where we've had a conversation about extremism.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's never been obviously within like the past year that everything's been going on. The attempted coup, in that attempt, right? You have military members, retired lieutenant colonels, Air Force reservists, all sorts of things and other military members a part of this, this storming of the Capitol. And it was honestly, to me, looking at the headlines and finding out that, we had a retired lieutenant colonel take the charge and was a part of it, and he was wearing like a vest and a helmet and all that stuff. I was like, it's extremely disappointing just because we're here for, obviously, you took an oath, and especially when you retire and stuff like that, like a lot of those values should, kind of still be ingrained in you. It's just interesting, and it was kind of shocking to see all these different military people a part of this storming of the Capitol because they were wrapped up in this extremist ideology, extremist groups, and they were heavily influenced to pretty much commit federal crimes, and I thought it was crazy that was happening. Obviously, because of everything that happened, the military had to address it. They had to be like, obviously, if these people were there, like these people, there's other people within our military organization that feel the same way, and this needs to be addressed. And why it needed to be addressed, obviously, is, I guess, when you take the oath of enlistment, you're like upholding, the Constitution, American values, all that stuff. But you actually kind of take a pause on your own rights in order to protect the rights of others, right? Mm-hmm. Or be a part of this organization that does. So I would say your allegiance or your alliance or, the oath that you take is with the military. It's not with, these certain extremist groups, the Proud Boys, Boogaloo Boys, any other, extremist group out there that is out kind of being disruptive to government. It doesn't align with what you're supposed to be doing. So obviously there was people within our organization that kind of, maybe they're not taking action and doing things like storming the Capitol, but they might have some of these ideologies right now. And that's what this conversation was about, right?
Yeah. I think that I think we have a tendency to get, I have a couple of things. One, I think we have a tendency to maybe some of us in uniform overlook what the oath of office means. Because to me, it was interesting to hear others' points of view of what it meant to them to take the oath of office. And I think, too, some people may get complacent and you get comfortable, and then maybe you just don't see it the way, you're not always operating at your highest function, and you don't, you just don't see it the way that you should. And I think this was a really good reminder for everyone in the military, like you just said, like, hey, you raised your right hand, you put your rights on pause in order to defend the Constitution of the United States. And lastly, I think what was interesting that you said is that, he was retired, right? The retired lieutenant colonel. But so when you wear a uniform, you never take it off, even when you retire. Like, you should always hold those values. And
yeah, I mean, you're getting cut a paycheck from the government because of your service, right? And
very
I think
true.
Officers take like a different oath. They have like different values, like pretty much like they're supposed to uphold like a certain military image. And that's even for people retired from the military, right?
Yeah.
So,
well, so in case
or good
you're
ambassadors.
unaware, when you're enlisted, it's actually called the oath of enlistment. And then and for me as a civilian, I took an oath of office. So even a DOD civilian takes an oath. We all take an oath, depending on whether you're a civilian, an officer, or enlisted. It's a little bit different, like you said. But until you just said it, I never really thought of it that way. That, even once, because when you're in the military, everybody knows, like, oh, like, I can't wait until my enlistment's up. I can't wait until I retire. Like, I'm done. I'm taking it off. But then you're really never taking it off.
I mean, you're done from the job, but, you can't be out there acting a fool. Obviously, storming the Capitol, like, they'll come back for you,
Of course.
Yeah.
So, which is why we ended up, I don't know.
And I think that guy, they ended up like pulling him back onto active duty to try him and like martial him and stuff like that. Yeah. So kind of intense, and that's like that's definitely like something super dishonorable to do. Mm-hmm. Regardless if like, your opinions on the government or the military, it's just probably shouldn't be doing anti-government things if you're getting cut a check from the military and the Department of Defense. So, I mean,
might want to rethink that one.
Yeah. So they know who you are. So yeah. So that whole thing was interesting. And then earlier on in the year too, they had a couple, some Boogaloo Boys. It's like an extremist organization. They wear like Hawaiian shirts with like tactical vests and stuff like that. They're like a really odd bunch, but I think in Santa Cruz they ended up attacking and assaulting, or ended up killing a police officer. I think like upon like he was gonna pull him over, he ended up being like a security forces raven, which is like
that was a shocker to see that.
A job in the Air Force, and they're kind of like their job is to protect go with the aircraft and protect the aircraft and do all this other stuff. They get all this special like training also. So pretty much this guy was using his training for the wrong things, and not, he ended up like killing a cop. And I was just like, man, like, what is the world coming to? You got military members, going against cops now, like randomly. Mm-hmm. Obviously, this is like a one-off thing. I mean, not everybody is. You're always going to have that one, right? So it's not really like I wouldn't say it's not everybody in the military is doing something like that. Mm-hmm. Hopefully. But because of these certain situations, they're like, hey, we definitely have to address this, and we have to make sure this does not happen. So that's kind of what the talks were about. But it was just interesting kind of seeing people's perspective on where our country has gone within this past year, with the riots, with, new presidents coming into office, all these different things that have been happening, turmoil within our country, and kind of to hear other people's opinion on like certain extremist groups and different things of that nature and what to do and what to look for, the identifiers of somebody who's an extremist was kind of interesting. Well, what did you guys?
What was our conversation like?
Yeah.
Our conversation was, I feel like we were tried to prepare for anything to be sparked, but I had a pretty good group, I would say. So I feel like everyone's concern was, what are the identifiers? What do we need to look for? Like and everyone was really logical. Like, let's weigh out like different scenarios. Like, let's, like giving someone the benefit of the doubt if they have an extremist book, and like, how do you, go about that? And,
What are some of the identifiers?
We discuss like, anywhere from what Facebook groups you join to, what books you have laying on your desk, to being enraged and like having open conversations about anti-government, like within the office, or talking about, I was looking up how to make explosives, and you're like, like,
Yeah, that might be your problem.
like we need to take a step outside. And so then, and so once we kind of hit that, then it's just naturally graduated to another side of the conversation, to where it was, okay, so I understand why I take the oath of office. So technically all of these scenarios don't apply to me, but what do I do when I'm at work and I see this from my coworker, and how do I handle this? So then, I just facilitated the conversation to go into that. Like, all right, like, let's talk about a game plan. Like, but what's an appropriate game plan? Like, you don't want to be, out in the open, like spreading gossip, office gossip, or you don't want to be, openly talking about it also in the office. So we try to talk about, like what that looks like, what's a proper game plan, like who do you need to notify, who do you need to talk to, and I took that moment to kind of talk about how important it is to instill not only camaraderie, but unity within your team, to be able to come together, because in the case that it's 5 versus 1, right, you need to be able to rely on your team to come together and devise a plan and make it and execute it flawlessly without minimal issues, because you never know whether you're sitting at, we're sitting at a level 0 or we're sitting at a level 10, and how dangerous that is, not only for you, but for your coworkers, for your workplace, for the mission, et cetera, et cetera. Everybody wants to go home at the end of the day. And so that's kind of like where our conversations gauged. Nobody was concerned over who was wrong, who was right, what side do you sit on, who's a part of what group. Like, it's like, well, it just doesn't apply here. Like, it's none of my business who your personal take is. And we all know, the rules that we're supposed to be abiding by. So
what, so interesting enough, for one of our scenarios it was like a case study, and it was like it was about hate towards LGBTB communities. Did I say that right?
It's the LGBTQ community. I had to edit that part when I gave it out.
So, it was like against that specific group. It's like the most common group that you're probably going to encounter with people having some sort of like hate rhetoric and like openly spewing things, in the office about members of this group or that I guess that are a part of, that are gay or trans or bisexual, but a lot of it was like the case studies were a little extreme in our group, obviously.
Yeah.
But I guess the practice was, one thing is kind of like not out of the ordinary, like it's odd, right? But once you start combining these, one identifier, two identifiers, three identifiers, all, you're like, this guy is probably mentally unstable and we need to contact somebody. One of the things that they talked about was like buying ammunition, like hate pamphlets, buying a bunch of guns, like going off all crazy at work, like being late, looking up stuff on your work computer that involves some sort of hate speech or hate groups, Facebook posts, interestingly enough. So all these like things, obviously, when you say them all together and you're like, hey, this person does all these things, then obviously they're probably like some sort of domestic terrorist or they're planning some sort of attack. And I mean, thank God I've never really encountered somebody like that in my work center or workplace, but I could see that person at somebody's work center, like openly saying, nobody addresses it, nobody says anything, nobody says, hey, we should check up on Jeff. He just bought, a bunch of ammunition. He just bought 3 guns. Now he has a bunch of pamphlets, and his Facebook posts say he hates all gays and he thinks they should die, So it's intense, It's an intense subject to think about and intense given that what's happened like in the past 2 weeks, where what happened in Colorado, right? The shooting and all these different things that are happening kind of towards certain groups, driven by all this like mainly misinformation, right? So I think as a nation, not just in the military, we really need to like take a step back and really look at this like misinformation. And I mean, I'm sure a lot of people already do it. They kind of fact check their Facebook posts or, different articles that they read, but it's kind of hard to escape it when it's everywhere,
I will agree with you on that. And I feel like prior to this year, I'm not sure that to be like 100% honest, I'm not sure that I ever really paid attention to it, like the misinformation piece that you just mentioned, in a way that I did this year. And then I remember like earlier in the summer, we watched a documentary about that and how with the virus, there was so much to do with plotting drops of misinformation, like through Facebook, through news sites. And it makes it more intimidating because it's like, who can you trust? And like you said, you have to take a step back and reevaluate. And I know when we first talked about them storming the Capitol earlier, like a few episodes back, I was like, sometimes I just have to, keep half of my head in the sand in order to keep my sanity. So I feel, especially with this year, that I've really stopped watching the news a lot. And I don't feel like that makes me less intelligent for doing that, because I feel like in today's society, it's so biased, and sometimes it is misinformation that they're putting out. Am I wrong for saying that?
No, I mean, like it's odd because, I mean, there's a bunch of documentaries on it about the misinformation and what Facebook fact checks and what they decide not to fact check, and what they let go out, or they can't control everything. I mean, they they were at the Supreme Court talking about it, under investigation, all sorts of things. Like, that should be alarming.
Yeah, it's
Obviously
scary.
you shouldn't take any of your news from social media, but it's kind of like a huge blurred line when you have, USA Today and like the New York Times on Facebook reporting news, but also Jeff down the street can also report news and write his own articles, and anybody is essentially a journalist. At this point, anybody can share a Facebook post, and a lot of these posts kind of, they look like they come from like a reputable news source, but then you kind of do a little clicking and you're just like, oh, this is like for some weird like extremist, pretty like domestic terrorist organization that is kind of leaking this out. You're like, this is weird, and it ends up on your mom's Facebook page, and you're like, what is going on? This is weird. So interesting enough, I just saw a pretty good docu-series on HBO Max. I've been trying it out, right? It's called like QAnon.
It's a whole series. How many episodes are there?
I think it's like a running series, so it's like four episodes. I watched them all. It's kind of funny because the cover is like it's a rabbit going into a wormhole. So it's like, oh, I went down the wormhole. Because, like it's all these different conspiracy theories and you kind of don't know what to believe. But essentially, they talk about the kind of where this whole started. Like Q, this guy that leaks out information that has like a huge amount of, like a huge cult following. Interesting enough, it like aligns with, the Trump campaign and a lot of Q followers. This guy that is like associated with Trump, or unofficially, is out there kind of like sending this like cryptic messaging, kind of like where you can just interpret it any form, any way that you want. And people are like taking they're called packets that are leaked, and then they take this information and they like, it just spreads like wildfire. Like they just like make all these different assumptions. They're like, okay, it'll be like, for instance, like a post would be like 11213. This is made up. Like the bird landed in the nest, and they're like, oh, the bird landed in the nest. That means Trump is gonna be in office, and 112 correlates with the degree that the sun is going to be that day, and it shines in this specific place, and it shines on this specific house that has this person. This person is attached to this organization. This organization is going to releases a newsletter every week, and this newsletter, the first, like it goes down this huge, like they just take this information and they like run with it. But interesting enough, this organization is kind of aligned, or this person Q is a part of these like message boards. They're called like 4chan and 8chan message boards. So pretty much it's like completely unregulated, supposed to be freedom of speech, right? And because they have this freedom of speech, it attracts a lot of these like hate and extremist groups to kind of post a lot of really disturbing stuff, so much to the point where I think some guy started this thread on this message board, ended up it was like a anti-Semitic neo-Nazi group or whatever. In the board, he's like, I'm going to take action, I'm going to do something, and the people on the board are like cheering him on. It's like a bulletin board where you could respond, and they're like, yeah, do it. He ended up live streaming him going into a mosque and like, killing a bunch of people, and it was all recorded, and people were like cheering him on in this like message board. Obviously it was taken down, but these message boards where people start this information, or these kind of like extremist domestic terrorist, groups, essentially, this stuff ends up on your Facebook. You know, it starts off as a meme, as a picture, and then now it's on your Facebook, and now I'm like soon after I'm in like an argument with somebody about how the post is not real, and like I'm like, what is going on? How did this even make it on my Facebook feed?
So the HN, it's part of the
4chan. I'm not
no,
even
there
sure.
were two. There were
8chan?
two of them.
Yeah.
There were two.
Yeah.
That's part of the dark web.
No, it's just
No?
like some board you can just get on.
So it's not part of the dark web.
No, it's not. It's not. I mean, I could be wrong, but I'm pretty sure it's not. Like, you can get on it right now.
That's wild. Yeah, when we were watching it, I watched one episode with him, and I was just, it was too much for me. I can't handle all that. Like, I'll lose sleep at night over it. In all honesty,
It was a lie.
it was really, really intense. And I feel like I didn't even, like, the episode I watched with you wasn't even that intense. Just for me to take it in, it was just too much for my little brain.
It was a lie, and this guy ended up, because he has. So it's these two different people, I guess, but one of them was going through like some sort of legal trouble because of obviously all this stuff that's been happening on his board, and like he's pretty much the guy that regulates all this speech and all does all this stuff on this board, and he's supposed to moderate hate speech and take it off, and certain things, to the point where he's like, yeah, it's pretty normal that the FBI contacts me and is like, hey, you have these death threats on your message board. I need you to like give us this information of who these people are. Oh, so big thing that I left out. So why these message boards are so big is because they're anonymous. So everybody's anonymous, and they're called Anons. So QAnon is the guy, like QAnon, anonymous. So that's why it's so like powerful for people to get on these message board and just like, it is kind of freedom of speech, because they literally say whatever they want without kind of your reputation or anything like that. So he's in some sort, or he was, I got to follow up on it, but he was in some sort of legal trouble, and he had to like, I think, go to the Supreme Court. And they were pretty much gonna go over his whole website and the regulation of it and all that stuff. But he ended up getting a lawyer for it, right? The lawyer was funded by like a white supremacist group. This guy that runs it, he's like half Asian, or he's Japanese, half Japanese or something like that. And he lives in Japan and is being funded by like a white supremacist group to kind of get him out of this trouble. So it just kind of, I was just like, what's going on here?
Like, it's all tied in.
Yeah, it's all tied in. And like,
Well, who else would fund that? Or who else would take on his case when you think about it?
Yeah, and it's interesting because like that's where his site is so big because of this QAnon followers, right? And then the hate or extremist groups that are part of this. So obviously it's in their benefit to try to help this guy out, which ends up being Japanese. It's odd. It's a pretty good documentary. I'm gonna keep watching it, but it kind of ties into this whole extremist thing, It ties into the storming the Capitol and all that stuff. Like, these message boards is pretty much why. I wouldn't say why. I'm not trying to point fingers, but it's a big reason where all this misinformation, all these kind of groups, extremist groups, domestic terrorists, start this whole, or get involved into these like weird message threads and communities, and like, it's odd.
So do you think that they need to take it down?
No, see, that's the thing, because like it is freedom of speech, right? But I don't know. I think they're not supposed to have any like hate group posts, but I don't think they do a good job of regulating
I mean, they
domestic
put an
terrorists.
entire
They have a lot of
stream
people
on there
Yeah, they have a lot of people.
of that
So
guy that
so for
shot
them,
up the
yeah, like
mosque.
yeah, one bulletin board isn't like it's so small with the amount of bulletin boards that are posted on that site daily or something like that. So it's really hard to regulate it. So now we're in this discussion about military extremist groups at our work, you know, because of all this stuff that's been happening.
Yeah, it all comes back, right? And I feel like, I don't know, regardless,
It's intense, I know. It's intense.
like I'm not an extremist, so I don't look, I'm not like looking to pick that up on my resume anytime soon. But I think it is important that you keep yourself educated and be aware of these things, especially with Facebook, because I mean, this is where Abe and I differ. And this is where I'm going to turn the conversation. I don't fuck with Facebook. Abe's laughing. We had a very intense summer, like not only globally, and then the pandemic and the Black Lives Matter movement and just everything else that trickled after that. And then in our house, we had a very intense summer because we had a lot of passionate debates on how to handle your Facebook etiquette.
What do you mean?
Like on how to conduct yourself on Facebook. I don't fuck with Facebook. Like, I don't care to argue with anybody.
Look, if you're wrong, you're wrong.
And Abe wants to tell you.
I'm gonna call you out. I'm gonna fact check you. You know, honestly, but lately I stopped. I had to stop. It was killing like my mental health because I was just like, man, these people, certain people, not everybody. I'm like, you're really lost. Like you're just posting all this like dumbass shit, and I'm like, somebody has to tell you. Then it ends up, obviously, I ended up in the I end up on the conversation, and then I'm like getting upset over, getting in an argument on Facebook. It was just killing my vibe. It was taking a lot of energy to do this, but also at the same time, I was like, I can't let this person go on and like think these like really hateful, negative things. Like it could be if I don't say anything, he's gonna feel empowered to do something else, or if somebody is like, hey, you're full of shit, like, oh, maybe I am full of shit, maybe this guy, I don't know. I always think about a lot of situations where I'm like, man, that guy has no homeboys. Like nobody told him like, hey bro, like you're doing way too much right now. Like,
and you are doing way too much. I'm just kidding.
Well, I mean, see, but I got homeboys, like, so you told me like, yeah, maybe you should lay off the Facebook arguing politically with, other people or fact checking people. When I'm like, yeah, you're right. It's not.
You think that a lot of what we saw over the summer, some of the news articles could have been something that came from those websites that trickled into our Facebook and people were reposting?
Yeah.
Because you were like, I need to fact check this. I need to fact check that.
Well, yeah, of course. And what's funny about it is like later on, then it would come out that it was like fact checked, but then also there's a lot of like just opinions, that kind of they portray it as like it's a fact. I'm like, it's not a fact. Like you're making this up right now, like this is your opinion. It's not real, So obviously Facebook, and that's what I was talking about, Facebook doesn't catch everything, right? So some things they do, like the more popular articles that are circulating, but it's not going to catch every meme or everything that you keep posting. And, they're going to be like, yeah, this article's fake. Usually if it's like a link of an article, they'll fact check it. But if it's just like a picture or something like that, they're not gonna flag it.
Got it.
Because it's harder to track down.
Yeah, how crazy is that you see it and then you repost it? You don't even think about it because you just assume because it's there on Facebook that it's real. And then you go and you repost it and you update your status and then it grows.
Because people get sucked into this whole thing where they're like, oh, this is real. Like, this is real, and I also feel the same way about this. So then they repost it, and that's why I'm like, if somebody would have just said, hey, that's not at all like what's going on right now, they'd be like, oh, okay,
Yeah.
let me rethink that. Okay, I understand now. But you let it happen once, twice, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times, and now this person feels empowered, and then they feel right to keep posting shit like this. And I'm like, all right, like somebody has to clip your wings. Like you're just posting all this misinformation all the time. It's not, can't. And then now you're influencing other people, So that's why I felt so strongly about always saying or speaking. But in the end,
speaking your truth.
Yeah, in the end, I was just like, people are going to be dumb. That's it. I can't stop them. They're going to believe what they want to believe.
And that's how I see it. But
they're going to find a means to solidify the statement or the idea that they have. That's it. That's what it is,
That's how I see it. But I also kind of look back to things that you said. And recently I learned that when you keep things in and you don't speak your piece, that it physically weighs on you and it makes you lose your energy and you become more lethargic, so people believe. And so I think that's interesting because I don't always speak on everything because I'm like, well, I'm pretty sure that if I sit here and I, let you know what's going on, that you are not going to listen to me, so why waste my time? Like, that's always been my motto. Like, I'm not going to waste my time or energy on someone that is not going to listen to me. Whereas you're like, you don't even think about that. You just feel so passionately. You just start talking. But I feel like probably it's better to have an easy balance rather than being one or the other.
Yeah. I mean, obviously I would rather have a discussion face to face. I'm not trying to go back and forth, in somebody's like comment box about how they're wrong or how, I don't really care. And I don't even care to be right. I just want people to be informed. That's it,
I like that you feel so passionately about that.
Yeah, but yeah.
All right, guys. We hope you have a great week. And hopefully your takeaway from this is that you will think before you share. And don't forget to fact check. And we'll catch you guys next Monday. Don't forget to subscribe and follow us on IG at The Collective Journey. Also, if you're listening on Apple, if you'll rate us 5 stars and leave us a written review because we love reading them. And we're out. All right, guys. Thanks for listening.